and welcome back to D3 on how to write a fractured fairy tale. So let's start up here where we left off. We're talking about writing fairy tale adaptations or fractured fairy tales. We know the classic story and we tell it often. We decide on a change, and then that change flows to all kinds of other changes in the story. It's really important that each change develops in the story as new changes so that the story flows together. So now today we're going to be talking about the small moment part of the story. So if you remember when we talked about outlines, we talked about how fractured fairy tales always follow a pattern. They have a background, they have a first scene or a small moment, a problem, and a resolution. So those four parts. We're going to be starting today on the small moment part. And that seems like a funny place to start. Normally we'd start with the background, but this is actually the most important part of your story. We talked about the thesis statement being the star of the persuasive speech. I think the scenes in this are the stars of fractured fairy tales. This is like the heart of the story. This is where all of the details and the things are really happening. Let's talk a little bit more about the small moments. We're familiar with those because we talked about those at the beginning of the year. So let's go over it a little bit. Small moments are things that happen. They don't spread out over a long period of time. There is like one day, one moment in time with lots and lots of details to explain what's happening. So if you have lots to say that develops over a long period of time, you need more than one scene. You need to have scene number 1, scene number 2, and scene number 3, or however many scenes you need to tell the story that you want to tell. So if we're connecting back to Cinderella that we read on Tuesday, that one had multiple scenes, like when they first moved in, her cleaning, her getting the invitation to the ball, then going to the ball, and there was multiple parts where time moves forward, and that needs its own small moment. So some of the most important parts about small moments are these things right here. Our characters, and dialogue. Dialogue is so important, and if you don't remember what that is, those are words that are being spoken, and we put those in quotation marks like this. So if someone says something as simple as hi, we put it in a quotation mark like this. And in small moment stories, there's lots and lots of dialogue because there are characters that are talking to each other. Now, the characters are super important because, well, they're the ones creating the dialogue, but also they are the star of the show. They need to be well developed. They need to be explained. They have lots of traits, both physical and internal traits, that need to be well explained as well. Okay? So today, I want you to really focus on the scenes in your story. So the story that you wrote yesterday, if it only has one scene, or if you fit it into one scene and it probably should be spread out, that's what we're really going to be focusing on. We're going to be spreading that out into as many scenes as you need to tell your story, how you want to tell it. And like I said, this is a really creative style of writing, so however many scenes that you want. And within each scene, make sure that it's very developed. Explain what your character looks like. Explain what the setting looks like. Make sure your characters are talking to each other and that they're doing different things throughout the story so that you can really fit in all kinds of special details, okay? So one thing that I didn't really talk about was that I said it had lots of dialogue and characters were very important in small moments, but the balancing part, that's also another important part about small moments. You need to make sure that it's not all just dialogue, just talking back and forth, with no descriptions of the characters or what they're doing or what they're feeling. You need to make sure that there's a mixture of both. And then from the opposite, you can't just have all kinds of stuff about that with no dialogue. Okay, so I'm back with an example. So yesterday I gave an example of a story that I would like to write about a goldfish instead of Goldilocks and the 3 turtles instead of the 3 bears. So I wrote just the beginning of one scene. I would like to make the scene a lot bigger, but I just wanted to start you off with some ideas and show how I can make the balance of characters and dialogue. So let's see. So remember, I had already made my background, and so this is leading into my first scene. But one day, when the three little turtles came home, they saw something was wrong. Someone has nibbled on my leaf, said the baby turtle. So I have my information that explained what was happening, what was going on. I also added some dialogue. This is how I'm going to use small moments to tell the scenes in my story. So I'm going to do one last thing, and I want to show you some ways that you can start different scenes, and I really like the examples that are right here. It shows once upon a time there lived a. That's a really good way to start your first scene. Lots of different stories start like that. The second one, but one day, unexpectedly, an evil, dot, 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 and that was the way that I started this one. And then, so then, they lived happily ever after. So that was their closing scene, which was their resolution. So those are some examples of how you can start different scenes and move from one section to the other. I'm really excited to read your revamped or your reworked small moments and scenes in the story that you wrote yesterday. Make sure to send them to your teacher so that we can read through them.